This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and very happy to have on the line with us Christine Hong. She's the Associate Professor and Executive Board Member of the Korea Policy Institute, Associate Professor at the University of California at Santa Cruz, the website kpolicy.org. The long, dirty history of U.S. warmongering against North Korea is her most recent article in The Progressive. Christine, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Great to have you with us. So what's your sense of what is actually going on right now in North Korea and in terms of the United States' response to it and the rest of the world's response to it?
Well, I'd say that what's happening in North Korea is something that North Korea has stated that it would pursue. So North Korea has become, and it has been, one could argue for some time now, a de facto nuclear power. And it has pursued this aim very steadfastly, very predictably. So against these kinds of portraits of North Korea as being totally unpredictable, I'd say that North Korea has been completely predictable in its pursuit of nuclear weapons. And it did pursue these in the wake of a number of things. So I'll say that in terms of the long history, which is something that most people in the United States pay very little heed to, you know, the backdrop to all U.S.-North Korea relations is the unending Korean War. The Korean War, which started at mid-century in the 20th century, has not yet been resolved with a peace treaty. And at mid-century, the United States actively threatened North Korea with nuclear annihilation. And in fact, in General MacArthur's, his posthumous interviews, his interviews that were published posthumously, I should say, he indicated that he wanted to actually bomb the area between North Korea and China with anywhere from 30 to 50 atomic bombs and create an area, a cobalt zone, where no life could live for at least 100 years. And ever since then, like in violation of the Armistice Agreement, the 1953 Armistice Agreement, the United States, until the early 1990s, actually deployed nuclear weapons to the southern part of the Korean Peninsula. The post-Cold War period, just a moment, I wonder if this is just...
It's okay. Christine?
Is this the... I was wondering if this was the line from your show. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you on Skype now. When you push the button on your phone, we lost your phone connection.
Oh, did you hear what I was saying at all?
Yeah, we heard everything you said. It sounded perfect. It sounded great.
I wasn't sure. Right. Okay.
Yep.
What I was basically stating was that in the post-Cold War period, North Korea has been threatened numerous times with nuclear annihilation by the United States. In 1994, William Perry, the Secretary of Defense for Clinton, actually actively considered a nuclear strike, and Colin Powell described turning North Korea into what he called a charcoal briquette. In 2002, the same period when George W. Bush nominated North Korea as part of the infamous trio, the Axis of Evil, the Pentagon's Nuclear Posture Review actually listed North Korea as a site of a possible nuclear first strike. From that moment onward, North Korea, observing a series of regime changes implemented by the United States around the world. And we can think of course, Iraq, but we can also think of Libya, which bargained away its nuclear program. It has seen fit to pursue, as a matter of just sheer survival, nuclear weaponry. And this has been the only way that North Korea has been able to even negotiate anything on the world stage. So, for example, like, you hear in the mainstream media that North Korea has spurned any sort of efforts at negotiation or engagement. That's actually not true. Throughout the George W. Bush period until the very end of his second term, which is typically when U.S. presidents get vision with regard to North Korea, only then did he very belatedly and too late indeed start to pursue pursue the possibility of engagement with North Korea. Throughout the entirety of Barack Obama's presidency, he pursued a hard line with regard to North Korea. And I'll say another thing, too, for your listeners, which is that not only throughout the Cold period, but in the post-Cold War period, it's been North Korea that has furnished the rationale for the productivity of the military-industrial complex. The United States' permanent warfare posture requires a permanent enemy, and North Korea has furnished that. The United States is not interested in a complex understanding of North Korea. It's interested in a cartoon demonized version, and it just so happens to be that in our present moment, this necessary enemy, this necessary ruse for the military-industrial complex, has in fact become a nuclear state.
Yeah. And I remember, when George W. Bush read that speech that David Frum helped write, Frum invented the phrase axis of evil, thinking at that time, Iran and North Korea are going to become nuclear states. I mean, they both immediately attempted to. I was talking about this on the air yesterday, and perhaps my memory is faulty, but I thought that in the mid-90s, Bill Clinton had worked out some sort of a deal with North Korea where we gave them limited recognition and some form of aid in exchange for their allowing the IAEA into their country and freezing their nuclear program. Am I remembering wrong? And is that a sort of viable next step if we wanted to establish rapprochement with them?
Well, here's the problem. You're remembering absolutely correctly. And in exchange for that, the United States was supposed to help construct 2 light water reactors, and it reneged on that. So we have to recall that from North Korea's perspective, the change in leadership in the United States amounts to a kind of sort of regime change on the U.S. end. And there is a kind of either historical amnesia about what each presidential predecessor has done, or an active attempt to do away with that sort of policy. So Bill Clinton indeed did pursue the possibility of engagement with North Korea, but when George W. Bush came in as a neoconservative hardliner with a very moralized understanding of human rights, he basically did away with Clinton's policies altogether and adopted, in contrast to his liberal South Korean counterparts, who actually wanted a sunshine policy of engagement with North Korea, a kind of inter-Korean peace. George W. Bush actually pursued an eclipse policy toward North Korea, and his policy was also described by observers as an ABC policy, which was all but Clinton. And as I mentioned, at the end of George W. Bush's second term, when he finally did get vision with regard to North Korea, what happened was Barack Obama came into office. And although he stated at the beginning of his presidency that he would reach out a hand to any U.S. foe that uncurled its fist, and indeed did make advances with regard to Iran and Cuba, but with regard to North Korea, let's recall that Barack Obama's signature foreign policy. Let's think about this. His Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, in his first term, where did she go in terms of her first grand tour? Not Europe, which is the customary site for secretaries of state to go to. She went to Asia. And so Barack Obama's signature policy was his pivot policy toward Asia, in which he was going to reallocate 60% of U.S. naval resources to the Asia-Pacific region. And Hillary Clinton, in a 2011 foreign policy blueprint, which was published in the foreign policy site, she stated, it was called America's Pacific Century. She stated that America's economic future, and this is a long sort of imperialist narrative, that America's economic future resided in Asia. And she said that the United States would use its militarized infrastructure from the Cold War within the region and resist any calls from the American public for troops to come home. Because the United States had to lead in this area. And what happened throughout Barack Obama's presidency is the North Korean threat, which was trotted out time and again, it actually justified Everything from weapon sales to U.S. allies within the region. It was very lucrative in that regard. It also justified the stationing, for example, of a nuclear aircraft carrier, which are basically mobile bases, sea-based bases, and military bases. It also justified the deployment of missile defense systems all throughout the region. It justified amplified war games, bilateral, trilateral, multilateral war games. All of this stuff was justified, if you look at the language of Pentagon documents, in the name of an armed and dangerous North Korean nuclear threat. But in point of fact, if you look at what Barack Obama's foreign policy achieved, this pivot policy, it achieved the encirclement of China. And this is what makes the claim by different, politicians and policy pundits, foreign policy pundits, about outsourcing the U.S. North Korea policy to China so incredibly ridiculous.
Well, this is also the basis of John Pilger's movie, The Coming War with China, is that we've got now 400 military bases surrounding China. Christine, can you stick around for about 10 minutes with us? Do you have the time?
Yes.
Because there's several levels of this conversation that I'd like to get into, and we have to hit a break here. But it'll be very short. If you just hold the line there, and we'll be right back. Christine Hong is with us. She's associate professor at the University of California at Santa Cruz, executive board member of the Korea Policy Institute, the website kpolicy.org. The Twitter handle is @kpolicyo, and as in the letter O. And we will be back with Christine Hong.